Qigong for Lovers workshop. I have taught this one particular technique in different workshops, but I have never taught it for this specific reason. I've been using this technique for many, many years now, not for anything sexual, but just for different things that it does. And then I discovered that it is often referred to as sexual kung fu. And I thought, I have not been using this as sexual kung fu. This is interesting. So I found out more about it.
Not doing it right.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was doing it right. But I was doing it for a different reason.
Right.
So there's different ways to use this particular Qigong technique. But before we do, let's just get ourselves a little centered and set our intention. So I like to just sit up nice and tall. Find a comfortable spot. If you have a seated meditative position, go for that. If you don't, and you don't know what to do with your hands, typically in what we practice, we place the hands directing the palms at the lower dantian energy center. And we're going to talk about that more later. But for now, just sit, relax, take a few slow, deep breaths, and set our intention for why we're here. And just finding our own peace, our own balance in the rhythm of the breath, and nothing more. Releasing any anxiety that may be built up over learning something new in a different way. And for the next 30 seconds only, I'm going to be quiet. And let's have you focus on nothing but the breath. Could you focus on nothing but the breath for 30 seconds? Some people can, some people cannot, and we're going to explore different ways of creating better focus in our session this evening. Yes, feel free to move about. That was just to get us kind of settled in, but you're in charge of what goes on with your body as we go along, because first we're just going to talk, and I'm actually going to read right off this paper so that I make sure I don't miss anything for you. Okay. And you're welcome to follow along or not. Some people prefer to just listen instead of read. Many people are aware of Tantra from yogic traditions, but maybe not so aware that Qigong has its own rich history of sexual practices that go far beyond sexual practices and take us into more of an energetic realm. And good sexual relationships often don't even involve physical contact. In fact, there are ancient Taoist techniques, such as the one we'll learn here tonight, that allows partners to exchange and unite energy at a rate of a higher vibration than the physical act of lovemaking. Many stories, in fact, abound in Chinese folklore of ancient masters who could make their partners wail in delight with pleasure from across a room. In fact, there is one such tale of a renowned Taoist teacher in his 90s whose energy, while pleasuring his followers who wished to remain virgins, his energy could be seen across a room by others as the two partners breathed qi between each other without ever touching. That's pretty astounding that other people could actually see the exchange of energy. The practice we'll be sharing tonight is one of the most cherished of all Qigong techniques to cultivate, circulate energy within oneself, and even to exchange energy with another person. But first and foremost, intentions must be in harmony between partners so that neither one nor the other becomes dominant in the energy exchange, as sometimes can happen in intimate encounters. Oftentimes, it is the desire for a partner that fuels romance. And when desire wanes, romance often wanes as well. So we set the intention in these practices that it is a mutual desire that both parties wish to unite and bring pleasure to the other. If the motivation in any kind of intimate encounter, even any relationship, is to receive from the encounter, this doesn't usually set us up for success. Typically, it can result in unfavorable encounters, in sexual encounters as well. For instance, if a man pressures his wife into sex, the end result can often be to leave him feeling depleted and unsatisfied, while she feels used and uncared for, even though they've just united. The desire and the intention should be to please. For the most favorable outcome in all relationships is to seek to give rather than to receive. And it is true in what we're doing this evening. Oftentimes, non-sexual communication is more satisfying than a quick roll in the hay. It is the wanting of our partner, not in the having of our partner, that keeps desire alive. That's why romantic dates, slow dances, cuddling on the couch, or simply staring into each other's eyes can keep the spark alive, even more than physical acts of intimacy can. And long-lasting, healthy relationships frequently utilize both sexual and non-sexual forms of intimacy, and that results in sustained, deeper connections over time, which is what we all want. We want to grow deeply together, not apart, and this technique is really well known for helping that. Now be aware that there are many sexual intimacy practices found in Qigong, just as there are in the tantric practices from yoga. But while the one shared here tonight is a very good place to start, it is not recommended to get fixated on technique. Because technique and position only go so far, and they have nothing to do with romance whatsoever. The thing that matters the most in connecting with our partners is the romance and the connection itself, not the physical contact or the technique. After studying and practicing the small heavenly circulation, which we'll be doing tonight, a couple may wish to explore other meditations, but remember that the key to success is not the technique or the position. It is the love and the connection that's shared between partners that is the key. The small heavenly circulation has been prized for centuries because it establishes a healthy energy flow first within the individual. And then that is brought into the relationship. Maybe in your past you've been in a relationship where things were a little out of balance, but yet we still tried to connect with our partner, even if they were out of balance or we were out of balance. And usually that connection doesn't flow so well because we ourselves need to be in balance first. And In Qigong, we think of good sexual relations as depending on 3 different levels of energy: the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual levels of energy. And we're going to talk more about this as we go along. To create and maintain a good sexual relationship, both parties must be on the same level. If one person is really unhealthy and one person is healthy, it's not going to be a good exchange, right? So both parties must be healthy physically and emotionally, and both parties must be at the same spiritual level. And practicing this technique can help bring all of that into balance within ourselves and also with the relationship with our partner. Only when body, mind, and spirit are on equal levels will the couple truly be able to unite as one, or as they call it in yoga, become a tantric couple. So the physical aspect of the energy. First, tuning oneself individually before making love can greatly enhance sexual interactions with a partner. It makes sense. If we're out of balance, then that interaction is not going to be as good as it could possibly be. And practicing the small heavenly circulation alone by ourselves actually tones the muscles of orgasm for both men and women. So it does act in a very physical way. And the small heavenly circulation practice alone also starts a woman's internal fire before sex begins, making arousal quicker, which for women tends to be a little slower than for men. For a man, practicing the small heavenly circulation before the sexual encounter will help to control the urgency in sexual desire, so that then the man can wait for his partner's desire to match his. On the emotional level, when a couple first meets, there is typically a very strong magnetic attraction between them. Most people have felt that when they have fallen in love. There's an actual physical magnetic attraction. That's chi flowing. That is energy flowing, right? Is what that is. Over time, this magnetic attraction may diminish due to the various stresses and strains of life and a relationship, which also has stresses and strains on it. And to care for one's own energy levels and emotional health first is paramount before trying to share one's emotional self with a lover. Practicing the small heavenly circulation does indeed balance emotions and can help to reignite the Jing energy that drives desire. Talk a little more about Jing in a moment. Let's get on to the third level of energy in Qigong, the spiritual level. Because the small heavenly circulation builds and distributes and unites the Jing, or sexual creative energy, with the Qi, the life force energy, with the Shen, or spiritual energy. Simply by engaging in the small heavenly circulation, we create deeper spiritual connection within ourselves, and then we can bring that into our relationship with our partner. And once we know the small heavenly circulation in ourselves, we can then practice it more successfully with our partner. And this little picture shows us where these different energies are housed. I really liked this picture because of the arrow that shows the energy moving up. This energy down here, this Jing energy in the lower dantian, is associated with survival, just living. Sex is needed for life, so it is considered part of the lower survival energy, along with eating and pooping and all those other things that we have to do just as biological organisms to stay alive. But then we move up into a higher level of energy. Once our physical survival is met, then hopefully we can move into more heartfelt relationships. Because not until our physical survival is met can we then engage lovingly with others at this higher energy center. And then maybe in time, we'll be able to transmute that energy up even higher into the more spiritual Shin energy realms. And we're going to talk more directly about that right now. In our crash course, truly a crash course, on the basics of the human energetics in traditional Chinese medicine. And there is a lot more to it than this, but I tried to be very comprehensive and succinct here for people who knew nothing about it. So what we're doing tonight, this technique, the small heavenly circulation, it comes from Qigong. Some people don't really even know what that is. So Qigong means energy work or energy healing or energy medicine. Qi meaning energy, life force energy, and Gong meaning work, healing, medicine, or skill. Now we can break Qigong down into two different disciplines. One is Wei Gong, the other is Nei Gong. Wei Gong is the physical and obvious that we get from Qigong. And you will see in the small heavenly circulation, we have a very physical component involved in it. The inner work, the Nei Gong, this is the invisible. And most of the heavenly circulation is Nei Gong because it's invisible. You cannot see what's going on. And because it engages both Nei Gong and Wei Gong, the small heavenly circulation acts as both forms of Qigong, internal and external. The principal energy storage areas in the body in Qigong are referred to as the three dantians, sometimes called the three treasures, sometimes called the triple burners, sometimes called the three warmers. And they relate to the energy centers in yoga, which most people are more familiar with. So we can think of, here you can see it in the picture, how they relate. The lower dantian, here below the navel, relates to the second chakra. But because the dantian is a field of energy, and lower dantian energy is where we're going to start, this base survival energy. This houses the Jing energy, or the principal energy, which we are all born with an abundance of. Jing is the generative or creative energy. It makes sense we're born with it because babies have to generate more body. They have to grow. They're all born with a lot of Jing energy. And it's believed in Qigong that Jing energy is the only type of human energy that can be doubled. It can be tripled. It can be increased. No other form of energy in the body is believed to be able to be increased except the Jing. If one wishes to conserve or restore lost Jing, sexual energy can create that extra power when it's conserved and recycled using the small heavenly circulation. Jing energy is denser than just general qi. It's a different kind of energy. And it often moves slower than just general life force energy. Jing is transformed into qi. Remember I said qi is more up in here. Jing energy is transformed into qi when it circulates around the vital organs. So not just by being stuck there, but by moving, that regenerative creative energy can then create more qi up here. But first you have to create more Jing to have more qi in the loving relationships. So Jing energy relates to sex, creativity, and also the sheer survival of being a biological being. And hopefully when that's moving and we are surviving and able to feed and clothe ourselves and put a roof over our head, then we can move our focus up into the middle dana, or what corresponds to the fourth chakra in yoga. So this is located in the center of the chest. Even though we think of heart sometimes as being off to the left, this is in the center of the chest, this energy center. And this is the area where most humans have felt their own energy in one form or another. When we fall in love, we feel something in the chest. Maybe if someone we know and cares about has a baby, we might feel something in our chest for them. Maybe if we watch someone we love getting married, we might feel that energy of love in our chest. Most people have, unfortunately, also experienced the opposite. The physical sensation of heartbreak or grief. We can physically feel that in the body, even though there is no physical reason for it to happen. That's energy. That's energy moving. It's not woo-woo. It's something everybody experiences. And most of us can relate to it the most right here in the chest, the middle dantian. While all energy in the mind-body is usually referred to as qi, when we get very specific, qi is housed primarily in the middle dantian. And it circulates throughout the entire body, especially when practicing the small heavenly circulation, and especially when we share loving relationships with others, whether they be romantic relationships or not. This qi energy goes far beyond sheer physical survival, and it's associated with loving relationships and a happy life. Neigong masters agree that building Jing energy will create stronger qi, and the best way to accomplish this is by circulating and therefore transforming Jing energy into qi energy, which we do in the small heavenly circulation. Healthy sexual encounters, if they're not excessive, because they move Jing energy, help to boost qi energy. Maybe one day we can fulfill all of our physical survival energies and fill our loving relationship energies and maybe move up into the spiritual realm. Most people that I have encountered, myself included, unfortunately, think that we can reach the level of the master up here without ever having to deal with that. Oh, I got all that in order. That's in order. Well, no, we gotta start from the bottom up.
The foundation.
Yeah, we cannot start from the top and go down and expect success. That located in the center of the head, not in the forehead. The upper dantian is the storage area for spiritual energy, Shen energy. Shen in Chinese means both spirit and to stretch, and is associated with the capacity of the mind to be aware and think beyond the obvious. Basically, the mind begins to stretch itself. Shin is the light in one's eyes, and it can diminish when one spends too much time focusing on the outside world instead of on oneself. In fact, in traditional Chinese medicine, it's understood that conditions of madness, losing your mind, any kind of mental disturbance, any confused state of being is associated with diseases of Shen energy. Probably because we have never focused on ourselves and have always sent our intention out there. Shen is the most electrical of the three treasures and is often associated with paranormal and psychic abilities. as someone with an abundance of Shen can see beyond the physically obvious, because it's no longer base survival, the obvious. This is beyond the obvious. It's a much higher plane of energy. And the small heavenly circulation gets all of those energies united and flowing together. How do they flow? You all probably already know this, but I'm going to go through it anyway, because we're going to get really detailed because it pertains to our practice. Energy flows through the human body through meridians in traditional Chinese medicine. So it's housed here, the Jing energy in the lower dantian. It's housed the Qi energy here in the chest. It's housed the Shen energy up here, but it moves through meridians or energy highways. And most people have seen those charts at the acupuncturist with all the lines on the body. I reproduced them here. This was a really nice one I found to include, where you can actually see it all. And this can come in useful in our practice where these lines are and looking at them. So I like to think of the meridian system truly as a highway system, because traffic is energy moving, right? Or maybe it's sometimes moving really fast on the highway. Sometimes it's moving really slow. Sometimes it comes to a dead stop. Sometimes there's a detour and things take longer or maybe go the way we didn't want them to go. These are great analogies for what we might experience in the practice. So I really like using the analogy of a highway and maybe even traffic jams. So there's 12 primary meridians, and man, does it get very detailed and challenging to remember all this. But the beauty is that we don't have to remember the 12 meridians, because we're going to focus on the 2 primary meridians in our small heavenly circulation. The 2 primary meridians control the energy of all other meridians, all the other meridians in the body. The conception vessel, or the Renma, and the governing vessel, or the Duma. So the Renma, you see from the photo, it starts right here at this point, and it goes down the center line of the body until it comes up inside us. I love that the Chinese have no problem depicting genitals, because they like to show all kinds of stuff with the genitals, right? So we have a picture here showing that the point that it ends at is not in the vagina, it's not in the anus, it's in between at the perineum. And then the Duma starts at the perineum, down here, and then it flows up the butt crack, up the central back line. This is the Duma. It comes around the center of the head, around the nose, right down to end here. So the Renma starts here. The Duma ends here. This is important to understand for our technique. And also down here. Now this picture here, I have included where these 2 actually unite. You see that inside at the perineum, they don't actually unite. They end without touching each other. Those ends don't touch, do they? No. So how we do this technique is we have to unite those meridians. And there's a specific way we do that. But we have to understand where they are first. And so that's part of it. Understanding this is the most yin line in the body, the Renma. I remember that because this is where conception starts. Mm-hmm. This is the yin, right, the front. And then the most yang comes up the backside. And I remembered that because I was like, oh, my back is strong. It's yang. My back's got me. My back's got me. It's the yang side. So this is the yin side. That's the yang side. And you may have noticed that this is shorter than this. the Renma is shorter than the Duma, which is much longer, which makes sense in terms of yin and yang. The yang is bigger, the yin is smaller. That tends to be one of their characteristics. So in the small heavenly circulation, which we are now going to do, we are uniting those two. So let's read through the solo practice of it before we start to do it, just so we have good understanding. So typically this practice is always done seated with the feet on the floor, because this does not come from yoga where we sit cross-legged on the ground. You know why? Because the Chinese have had furniture longer than Europeans, way longer than the rest of the world. So they got used to sitting in a chair, and they found, hey, that's way more comfortable than sitting on the ground. We're going to do our meditations in the chair. So we typically use the chair. But if you have a seated meditation practice on the floor, there is nothing wrong with doing it on the floor. The only thing is, you don't get the grounding effect of the feet being flat on the floor. This has a very grounding effect to our energy. And when we sit cross-legged, the feet are not flat on the floor. So there is one advantage to sitting this way. And when we do our seated meditations in Qigong, we don't sit with our back against the chair. We sit, as my one teacher liked to say, male teacher, we sit so our genitals hang over the edge of the chair. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Sit so your genitals hang over the edge. And that way you're forced to engage your muscles and sit up straight. Feet are shoulder width, toes forward. And the hands are resting comfortably. Again, if you have a practice where you hold a mudra, that's fine. If you don't, in Qigong, we typically line up the Lao Gong points in the palm by stacking them one on top of the other. So not finger on top of palm, but palm on top of palm. And then we place the palms so that they focus the energy of the palms at the lower dantian, either with the hands just out or touching, however's comfortable. But really it's up to you how you hold your hands. We connect the governing and conception vessels. First, by putting the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth behind the two front teeth. That brings those two together, those two vessels. Then we lift the pelvic floor, like doing a very light Kegel. That makes those two lines, those two vessels come together. So basically by touching tip of tongue and lifting pelvic floor, we just flipped the white light switch so that the energy will now circulate between the Renma and the Duma. And you don't have to use special technique to put tip of tongue on roof of mouth, lift pelvic floor. Now you have best flow of energy between yin and yang meridians, which regulate all the other meridians. So we don't even have to think about if we get those two going, they control all the others. Just by doing that, without even thinking of anything else. But we're going to do more. The third part, this classic Taoist meditation way of doing this technique is to visualize a black ball running along the orbit of the circulation. That's how I first learned it. And that's how it's written in that the Way of Qigong book. To visualize a black ball. But any visual will work. So I'm just throwing that out there. Some people have tried it with the black ball and they're like, I don't like that black ball thing. I'm like, you don't have to use it. So we're going to experiment with different visuals this evening. But typically we use a black ball. And as we inhale quietly through the nose, we visualize that black ball going down the center line, the Renma, and up inside. And as we exhale, we visualize that black ball coming out up around the Duma to end at the upper lip. It's a fairly simple technique. So It's recommended to continue for at least 10 minutes with a consistent rhythmic belly breath. We're going to do it various times and practice it various ways. And before we get into the next part, we're just going to do it. Is it clear, those instructions? So as we inhale, we visualize a black ball going down the front center line and up inside. And when we exhale, that same black ball comes out, up the butt crack, around the back, over the head to end here. And it's an orbit, a small heavenly circulation, because your body is heavenly. And we are circulating chi around it by using our mind. So I'm going to time it for 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I'm not going to tell you when to breathe. I'm not going to tell you anything except to settle in and let me get at a good spot on my second hand to begin. And then just begin. At first, it might take a while to sync up the visual with the breath. That's okay. Just keep focusing on it. First minute. Stay focused on moving chi in time with your breath. The length of the breath does not matter. Just sync it up with your visual of a black ball circulating around your heavenly body. If you should lose focus, it's okay. Just bring it back to the breath and the ball moving in time with the breath. When we reach a point that we're ready to close our meditation, we just return our awareness to normal breathing and drop the visual of circulating chi for a few breaths, and then we bring ourselves back into the presence of the room and the reality of sitting on a chair. Move about however we wish as we start to open the eyes. I know that you all have meditative practices. And so it might be easier for you to stay focused than some folks. Did you have problems staying focused for 3 minutes?
Twice, but I was able to pick it right back up again.
Nice. So you're already ahead of the game. Some people I've taught this to, they're like, whoa, I couldn't even stay focused for 3 minutes. What's up with that? Well, if you can't stay focused on yourself for 3 minutes, how can you stay connected to your partner for any length of time? Exactly. Which is part of why we learn how to do these things for ourselves before we learn how to share them with our partner. And because most people have problems staying focused for that length of time, there is a cool app that I like to share with people. Because it can really help with staying focused. And I use this app oftentimes to help me stay focused longer and longer. It looks like a little ball. It's called the Breathing app. Pretty easy to remember. Called the Breathing app. It's free, which is nice. And it has different timers that you can set down here. I set it for 3 minutes. And what this does, it also has different breath lengths that you can set. I have it set for the highest setting on it. So the inhale is 7 seconds, and the inhale is 5 seconds, and the exhale is 7. And so you can follow the ball visually, or you can follow the sound. So you can do it with your eyes shut. And you can set it for 10 minutes, you can set it for 40 minutes, you can set it for any amount of time you want. And so that can really help to stay on track with what you're doing. And because the inhale is shorter than the exhale, this accounts for that. I showed you it's 5 second inhale, 7 second exhale.
It was comfortable.
This app was designed by the Chopra Institute to create what's called a resonant breathing pattern. I had never heard of resonant breathing. I was doing this technique for many years until I heard about resonant breathing. I'm like, what's this resonant breathing thing? And then I found out, and I'm like, oh, that's a small heavenly circulation pattern of breath. The shorter inhale with the longer exhale. I was like, oh, this is perfect for this technique.
Cool.
Because you can set the time and do it as long as you want. Let's try it with the app and see if maybe that helps with focus. Just to experiment. And maybe you want to try a different visual. If you were doing black ball before, maybe how do you picture chi moving? What is your visual of energy moving? I often will use water. I envision like a gentle stream flowing around me. But the visual is really up to you. I do bring it right back in my practices to the black ball because there's something to that black ball. There's really something to it.
It was easy to focus on.
Yeah. Some people really like it. Some people hate the black ball. And that's why I'm like, you don't have to use the black ball. You can use any visual.
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay.
Yeah, it works for me.
So I will just go ahead and hit the start, and it's set for 3 minutes. This is the inhale, and then the exhale. And you can just listen to the tone or watch the ball. Some people like to watch the ball grow. And you notice it just quietly stops when your time is up. So.
It might be hot.
Oh, good.
Yes,
Energy moving.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. Maybe it was easier for you with the little prompt then.
Okay.
Because that's what I was going to ask. Did you find it any easier with that?
Yes.
Yes. That's why I introduced this. I've never had anyone that I took a class from have an aid like this to help with it. You always just had to stay focused.
Now
But
that
once I discovered that, I was like, oh, this is perfect. The
Now that
breathing.
it's in
app.
there, it will stay there. I'll hear it every time now.
The cool thing about that tone, since you said you'll hear it,
Every
is
time.
it was created by Moby specifically for this app.
Cool.
They wanted to use tones that were healing. So the Chopra Institute contracted with Moby to create the tones that were used so that even the tones would be healing in their effect. So I'm glad that that's
Nice.
the tone that's stuck with you.
I do a lot of tone work and it's familiar.
Oh, cool. Did you experience anything other than what the meditation is? Heat. For instance, when I first started doing this, for goodness sake, I couldn't get that ball up the center of my spine. Not to save my life. It was off to the left. It would come up. It would come up and then it would go off to the left and then come back. And then every time it would go off to the left and go off to the left and come back. And I was like,
very smoothly right up my vertebrae.
nice.
It sort of wants to disappear over my belly.
Disappear.
And then it comes back.
Yes, this is
But
good.
But it's getting more visible.
This is good to recognize.
Yeah.
And I feel joy, like silly. It could make me giggle.
Oh, cool.
In there.
Circulating chi makes you giggle. Nice. I like that. So really why I'm asking this is because different people experience different things. And if you encounter any of these things, it is an indication that the chi is not moving through those channels. There's some kind of traffic jam. There's some kind of energy block. And for me, it was obvious where it was. It was avoiding that area in my back. And I had an injury to my back in that spot when I was very young and had issues with it for many years. I no longer have it. And no longer does that do like that. It goes right up the spine. But
Here
you
is
might.
where I lost it the first time around. I lost it 3 times. And here.
You might, like you said, it disappeared or you lost it. You might experience different points where I'm not feeling that ball here. I'm not seeing that ball. I'm not, it's like skipping over this part of my neck, or it's skipping over until I get to here. I'm missing this. This is indication that there's some kind of energy stuff going on in that area.
Okay.
Whether it's from past trauma, emotional, physical, who knows? Who cares? Because as long as we keep focusing on where we want it, that's going to bring it back into balance. So if it's off to the side, if it disappears, what other things can we encounter? At first you might encounter difficulty syncing the breathing with the visual. Difficulty visualizing the energy touching every single part. Like you said, it just disappears. It just goes away over certain parts. There still are sometimes various parts where I'm like, I'm missing it here. And then I really focus on getting that visual to touch every single little part.
It sort of misses here, floats over that part.
And I should have said this before. The visual is on the surface of the skin. It's not inside the body. The Renma and the Duma only come up inside at the perineum. Otherwise, they're on the surface of the body. So we visualize it touching every little part. Sometimes I miss this little part under my belly button. When I'm doing it, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on in lower dantian? Are you feeling unsettled? Are you feeling unsafe? And typically that's what it is. And then I get the visual going and I'm feeling settled and safe again. So you might encounter those things, but know that that's okay. It's just a part of what's going on, but stay focused on bringing the visual back to where it is supposed to be. I really like that I wrote this in here. Remember that this is alchemy. It's a process. And typically it doesn't happen all at once. It's not a quick fix like a pill or a microwave to get our energy to flow right. And for me, it took me a very, very long time, months, to get my energy to flow up the center line, as opposed to scooting off to the left on my back. It took me months to get that in order. But I haven't had back problems there in years, and there was no physical intervention for my back. It was all the Qigong work that I did on myself, right? And I think that this small heavenly circulation played a part in healing my back and staying focused on, okay, bring it back to center, bring it back to center. So whatever you might encounter, keep that in mind. And to close the meditation, we simply stop the visualization and focus on the surrounding environment. So now back to this part that we kind of skipped over. This small heavenly circulation goes by different names. It's sometimes called the microcosmic orbit meditation. Don't ask me how to say the Chinese. I don't know how to pronounce it. But that, if you see it in writing, that's what it looks like in writing, the Chinese name. It is sometimes called sexual kung fu due to the many sexual benefits, including it's known to regulate libido, produce and circulate Jing, better orgasmic control for both men and women. In fact, in women, it's been known to create multiple orgasms, even in women who have never had that before. Deeper levels of intimacy. And it's been found to produce full body orgasm instead of genital orgasm. Whole being orgasm! How wonderful is that? Yes! Yes, and all you have to do is visualize this, right? It is a Taoist meditation which predates Buddhist meditations. It's been around, this particular meditation, for its guest around 2,500 years. It is known to balance the most yang with the most yin meridian, and in so doing, the exchange of energies in all meridians becomes balanced. Therefore, it is energy healing. The small heavenly circulation also grounds our energy while increasing energy. That is an interesting concept to me. Grounds my energy, but also increases energy. Sometimes we don't think of those two going together. And I wanted to ask you, Lisa, if you experienced anything different from the second time, because I noticed your feet were not flat on the ground. They were like this. Mm-hmm. So I had immediately noticed it. I'm like, oh, don't say anything. See if she experiences something different. And then I forgot to bring it up after.
No, the second time was way easier because you had music to go with it.
No. But that too is part of the grounding effect with the feet on the ground. So increasing energy as well as grounding. It stimulates the endocrine or hormonal system. It's known to heal neck and back pain. It sure did for me. Alleviates stress and dissipates mental confusion, worry, and anxiety. Remember I said disorders of the Shen, mental disturbance, they can be corrected just by doing this. In fact, that's one of the prescriptions in traditional Chinese medicine, is to do this meditation. It helps with sleep disorders by allowing mental energy of the head to descend. Have you ever had that, where you're so caught up in what's going on in these thoughts, work, projects or something you're working on personally and you cannot get that to stop. I've tried this where I had that. Small heavenly circulation makes that energy move out of the head. And then you can fall asleep. And that's nice when you need to sleep and you can't. So there's many things other than intimacy that this technique can be used for, which was why I started using it, which had nothing to do with intimacy. It creates a rhythmic, resonant cycle of breath. And on that breathing app, there's actually a little informational sidebar. They have all of the research results from the Chopra Institute about studying this. They created the app because of what they discovered it does to the vagus nerve and how it helps the vagus nerve so much. And you seem like you know about vagus nerve. Yes. Resonant breathing regulates the vagus nerve and reduces overall inflammation, and it has been found to repair leaky gut. That's one of the things the Chopra Institute found. And when I took a little mini class online with Deepak Chopra, he talked about this in particular. He said, we were using all of these Ayurvedic herbs and whatnot to deal with the leaky gut until our research department concluded beyond a shadow of a doubt that resonant breathing alone heals leaky gut. It doesn't matter what you eat. It matters how you breathe. That's pretty powerful. And then conception and governing vessels are close to the surface, not under the skin. So that's the basics of that. Now, I wanted to bring up the sexual kung fu thing, because if you go to YouTube and you type in sexual kung fu, lots and lots of teachers have videos about this practice. And maybe they say things a little differently. Maybe you would like to hear another person's interpretation. Of the ones that I looked up, they all missed the point. Every one of them missed the point.
What point?
This point right here on this picture. Because most of the depictions that I have heard, that I have seen in books, they fail to have the energy come up inside. It only goes around the outside of the body, which if we're engaging for intimacy reasons, we need it to come up inside, because that energy here needs to be stimulated from the inside to get it going. In the beginning, I wasn't having it come up inside me. I did not have the same effects as when I started studying with Grand Master, who said, I know how the books have it, but it has to come up inside. Otherwise, we don't actually unite the Renma with the Duma. So if you go and check those out, or any further reading or whatever on these practices, and they miss the point, you know the point now. You have to stimulate the lower dantian, the Jing energy, by purposefully bringing that energy up inside and then letting it come out and flow. It's not just around the outside. It does go up inside as well. So there's that, and practicing on your own. You notice on the very last page we have the partner practice. The partner practice is basically identical, except now you're doing it with someone instead of just you. It helps to do your own version solo first, to just get that energy moving and balance inside you, before then doing it with a partner. And it typically works best that way anyway. Get yourself centered before going into the part where you're trying to have good relationships. So I'm not going to go over every tiny little detail, because we went over every tiny little detail except for the part where we do it together. How do we do that? together. Well, typically we're sitting the same way, just like this, but we look at each other. Right? This is the part of sharing Shen energy up here, right? We stare into each other's eyes, which in and of itself is just lovely to do with someone you love, whether it's a sexual love or not, to share that energy, that spiritual energy through the eyes. So we don't have our eyes closed, we're looking into our partner's eyes. And then we have to decide. We have to communicate verbally with each other. Who's gonna start? Who's gonna be the inhale? Doesn't matter who it is, because then we do the reverse. We change it. Right. So we decide who's going to be the inhale. Okay, I'm going to be the inhale. So both parties visualize the person who has the inhale having the inhale come up inside that person. And then the exhale, we visualize whoever is the exhale, that energy comes out and up and around their back.
Wow.
Right? There's other visuals we can use, but this is a good place to start with the one we already have, where the energy flows down the front of the person who starts the inhale. Obviously, we're both inhaling and exhaling. And then we switch the visual on the exhale to the other person. The energy comes up, out, and around to here. Does it make sense? Because it's hard to
if
describe.
you have the inhale, it inhales down you, and then it comes back up my back.
Yes.
And then inhales.
Yes.
And then back.
So you inhale down one partner up inside.
Yeah.
You exhale out from inside up a back around the other. So let's say it's the two of you. Yeah, so that's why you have to communicate about it, right?
Right.
And the best way to do it is to turn and face each other, either close together or from across the room. You can have an intimate encounter in the middle of a party and no one will know. Yes. And because you resonated with this app,
Okay, cool.
we're going to do it again for 3 minutes. Just 3 minutes. Because we're going to reverse
We're
too.
going to inhale down you and exhale up me.
Okay, it's
Right.
good to
Is that what we're
communicate
doing?
that.
Okay.
And first we just sit and we just settle into our own breath while we gaze lovingly into our partner's eyes. share what we experienced with each other. It helps
midway,
to
it was,
talk about it.
was like
About midway is when I finally settled in. I had a lot of trouble running that black ball up her spine. Once I got it up here, everything was fine. And then I could go back to me and then struggling to get it. But about halfway through, then it all got smooth.
just sort of, it's like being on a swing
It
together. Or
was.
something.
It was
Swing
very
set.
cool. This whole rhythm
Yeah.
thing found itself, and
Yeah.
then, yeah, cool.
So you understand that it is about sharing energy, using the breath and the focus. And when we have that connection through the eyes, it's easier to share that. Sometimes it's hard to break that connection.
I
once
kept
we
wanting
get
to
it
follow the
started.
ball with my eyes.
Ah,
Yeah, and I saw you do the same thing
Yeah.
up here.
Yeah, because I lost it. You know, if the visual goes away, I got to find it again somewhere. And then I
Right.
lose that visual between here and there.
so you might start to notice the more you practice this technique on yourself, that when you start to share it together, you can begin to feel where your partner might be a little unbalanced
Cool,
just by the energy exchange.
cool.
And in doing it together, you help each other to balance, not just between you, but in yourself as well. So now we're going to reverse direction.
Okay.
And I want you to notice if you experience anything a little different. So first, just get settled in. And again, we'll just do 3 minutes. Take a few slow breaths. Get comfy. And then that's where we begin. And again, it can sometimes be challenging to break the connection. But it is good to discuss anything that may have been different, especially.
Different. Yeah, it was different.
Oh, it was very different.
Yeah.
It was very different this way. Yeah,
I can't tell you what was different, but it was.
I felt you more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're back, or you felt me more here.
I felt you more.
Okay.
That's when I told you to close your eyes, because I knew we could close our eyes to that. And as soon as I closed my eyes, it was like,
I didn't close my eyes when you told me to close my eyes.
you don't do anything I tell you to do. So
That's funny.
Eventually.
That's funny. Yes, some people feel better with the eyes shut. Some people visualize better with the eyes open.
Yeah.
And some people visualize better with the eyes shut.
The eyes distract me from the feeling.
yeah, same here.
I understand. I feel things internally and energy better when my eyes are shut and I don't have the visual stimulus.
Yeah, same for me.
It's different for everybody though. But you may have felt a little bit of difference in the energy because of where it started from. Where the energy begins changes how it feels. So whether we choose to start with one partner or the other, it is important when doing it together to then reverse.
To switch, yeah.
Yes, I'm sure.
And in that way you create better balance. In the energy of the relationship.
Yeah, I can feel it now. The difference between how we felt when one of us finished and how we felt now that both of us have done it. It feels different.
Yeah, it does feel different because we each have different energy and we're uniting that energy by doing this. So, another variation.
And yeah, you were hot.
I was? I don't feel hot now. Yeah, you got it.
You got the heat.
Yeah.
You picked it up. Yeah. So you can feel how you can actually exchange energy
I
without
knew when
even
I started
touching.
feeling her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You started to feel her heat. Yeah, you started to get hot
Palms are
because
sweating.
we start to feel and pick up different things. But it works best when we
Feet are
first
sweating on the
feel it in ourselves and recognize it in ourselves. Because you don't know what someone else is feeling or if it's coming from you. But once we experience it in ourselves, and then it's like, oh, that definitely was not from me. Because that is not something that I have ever felt just in me, right? I know it came from you because I've never felt that before practicing.
Well, it's familiar, but I know it's not me.
Right, right. It's different than our own energy.
It is.
Yeah. So there's different variations of this we can use. My favorite variation with a partner is not the one we just did. Because my favorite variation is when we use the central channel, not the Renma and the Duma. Instead of visualizing it flowing down one person on the front and up the back, we can visualize it flowing through the Chiang Mai of both people, the central channel, right in the middle, that isn't in the surface. Like the Renma and the Duma. The spine, you could basically think of it as the spine. So we can visualize the energy. Still, we have to discuss where is it going to start. Flowing down my spine, down my central channel, and then flowing right up your spine. One spine to the other. Right? One spine to the other. And in that way, it is actually going inside because the spine is inside.
Straight up to pelvic.
Yes. Yeah. So
down on the inhale, up on the exhale.
It's still the same. Down on the inhale, up on the exhale. Yin energy flows down. Yang energy flows up. So we can still use that same visual with the breath, but just changing now from the surface of the body to inside the body. So let's try that for our round and see.
So center myself first.
Yes, get yourself centered,
There.
take a few breaths. How it works best with a partner is when we change to just take a few breaths on your own and visualize that change, whether it's changing from black ball to some other visual or changing where the breath is traveling, on the surface or through the center of the body. It's good to set it up in ourselves first for a few breaths. So do that now.
So are we you gonna do the inhale first?
Okay.
And then I do it.
Okay.
Because then we'll reverse it again and notice
That'll
any
be our way.
difference we feel. So just take a few breaths for yourself alone. And then we'll go to moving chi together. Was it any
Yeah, that was lovely.
different for you?
Yeah,
Was
oh, yeah.
it any
Physical body
different?
response.
Yes, it can reignite that magnetic attraction, which doesn't come from having sex over and over again. It comes from uniting energy.
Connecting.
Yes, actually connecting.
That's cool.
So we're going to do a slightly different variation before I set you free. And we'll go slightly over time. I hope that's okay. Now I want you to move very far apart. Like across the room. And we're just going to do the same thing but reverse direction. And I want you to notice if it changes your connection at all. So we started with one person inhaling on the last one. So this time we will start with the other person inhaling. And since we've kind of already set up that variation, we won't set it up in ourselves to begin. We'll just start with the partner practice. And I want you to note if you feel anything differently by being physically further apart. So we'll begin. Even from across a room, sometimes it's hard to break the connection. Wow.
Yeah.
So I gather the distance didn't make a difference.
I wouldn't say it didn't make a difference, but
Stronger.
Well, it created this like channel.
Yeah. That sort of like amplified it between me and her. The more space between us made it bigger.
That's cool. That's cool. The more space, the more intimate the connection. Like I said in the beginning, sometimes, in fact, our most intimate connections usually have nothing to do with the physical. Yeah. So it is possible to have an intimate encounter even when you're in different parts of the country. Yeah. You don't have to be physically in the same room to experience energy exchange, as you just noticed. Other variations. Sometimes we want to have physical connection. And you can do this with physical connection. One variation, sitting in a chair, is to have one person's feet on the inside touching while the others are on the outside. And in that way, you're touching feet, you're touching legs. Another is to sit
when you're touching
even
the feet,
closer.
Is there like the one who's on the outside does the inhale first? Or the
Nice
exhale
question.
Really good question.
I
This
answer
would be
it
the yang
with,
would be the outside, so that would be the exhale.
I will answer that with, don't we trade back and forth?
Well, yeah, but then you do that. Too.
Yeah.
And then you trade the
Experiment.
exhale. Yeah.
So the point of the variations is to experiment together
It
and
feels
notice
different when you
the
change it.
differences.
I like
Maybe
the
you'll find
simplicity of the internal.
maybe
Way
you'll find that
easier. That's
you
fine.
really like this variation or you really like that variation. So we're going to do both of those because we both really like
The
them.
spine seems to like click in somewhere
Aha.
between here and there and there.
This is another variation that I have not shared with you yet. We can visualize that our partner is actually sitting on us and that our spines are actually clicked into place. And then we can visualize that we share the same energetic body. And so when we do it, we both experience the inhale flowing down our front, even though it's one body.
Right.
And we both experience the energy flowing back up. So many variations that can come into this practice. And just because I like to throw out more variations where the limbs are actually tied together, bound together with rope.
Bound energy.
Yes. So now we have the physical representation of the energy bound together by binding legs together with a rope, or maybe tying hands together. Even from across a room, it makes a difference.
I bet.
Cool.
Yeah. So I've given you a lot to work with,
Yay. Thank you.
a lot to think about, a lot to experiment with. The basic technique is pretty simple. Breathe energy down, breathe energy up.
Right?
Yeah. And then any kind of variation you can think of is possible from there.
So is the ball and the exterior work and the spine work, are they the same work or are they we should be doing?
When we do it alone, as a single person practice, we always do the outside of the body,
Not this.
not really
Use
the
this
inside.
for connection.
The inside is more for connecting with another.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
That makes it more of an internal energy connection.
Okay.
When we do it for ourselves, it doesn't work the same. If we visualize energy flowing down the spine, back up the spine, down the spine, back up the spine, it does not nearly have the same energetic effect. I'm glad you brought that up. So when we practice alone, typically it's always down the front, up the back surface of the body, not the spine, the Chiang Mai channel. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I feel good.
And I've actually had people tell me they experimented with the possibility of sitting on the floor, cross-legged with legs around each other,
body to body,
body to body, or sitting back to back, touching backs and trying it different ways. This is what makes it a fun technique, because there's different ways to do it, and every different variation feels differently and creates a different connection with the partner, which is why it is, I think, the best place to start with sharing energy with a partner. But again, we don't want to get caught up in technique.
Okay.
It is about sharing energy. It's about creating the connection. And sometimes just sitting and looking at each other is all the connection we need.
We meditate together. So, connected.
Thank you for letting me be a part of this part of
you.
your life. I hope that it was a useful lesson.